Good morning. I thought today, well, basically, I just wanted to bring you to this absolutely beautiful bluebell wood. And so I really hope at least one person can join today and experience this with me. And with foraging, as I often say, it's a very sensual experience, so I hope you're enjoying like the visuals. But even before you walk into this wood, there's like, yeah, the gentle aromatics of the bluebells on the breeze, or just in the air, is just amazing, kind of sweet. So bluebell woods at this time of year, often I find there's lots of ash around. Where there's lots of ash around, there's lots of King Alfred's cakes to gather, there's young ash leaves to gather to cook as food. It's a little bit of a process to remove the bitterness, but not much. There's dryad saddle mushrooms on the ash, which I looked all over yesterday. And it's one of those things with foraging is, yeah, you have this idea, you know, I really want to go to the bluebell wood and I want to find dryad saddle, and then I want to show how you can identify it, and then we're going to eat it. It'll be great. And of course, there's no dryad saddle. It's probably too early, maybe, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I've still got to come to this lovely place. So what I'd like to do today, I'm going to look at something that's quite short-lived from a wild food point of view, and that's edible stems of various plants. They quickly become tough, so you lose the ability to kind of eat the succulent centre. So we're going to look at that, and also we're going to look at pickling various things. So I've set up my field kitchen, if you like, just down the path in another little area. So like, follow me. It'll just take a couple of minutes, and Sarah, my wonderful assistant, will hopefully give you some lovely shots of this bluebell wood. Oh, there we go. There we go. Can you see any questions?
No, not so far.
You can't?
No.
No. Because they're not scrolling.
Oh, they are, but there are no questions.
If this was also a woodland where there were huge mounds of those wood ants that you often see, usually pine woods or the edge of pine woods, I would probably pick one of those bluebells. Horror of horror, I picked a bluebell. If I was with kids, you know, this many bluebells, picking a bluebell, and it's just so fascinating for children and you know, people with an inner child that never grows up, to get a bluebell and just kind of tap it on a wood ant mound, and they will inject it with formic acid and it turns the bluebell pink, and then you smell it and it smells like when you've just put vinegar on your hot chips. Like it's just a fascinating thing to do, just to see, yeah, and experience the whole biochemistry of what's going on with that colour change. But there aren't any wood ants around here, which is a good thing, because I'm going to be sitting down for about an hour with some food, and they'll probably be finding me and probably finding ways up my trousers and down my pants and all sorts of things. So that's not going to happen today. That's my prediction. Hopefully, I could be wrong. They could be around. We're almost there. Oh, and what I've picked up on the way, I've picked up this bit of elder, the elder tree or elder shrub, elder bush, and it's got some dried jelly ear fungus on it. You can see that. Can you see that? Not very well. Just kind of there. You'll see that more clearly later. Who can spot my field kitchen? That. How's the sound today, by the way? Could you give me a thumbs up if the sound's good? If you watched my last video, you would have seen I created some unusual contraption out of bulrush, or rather reed mace heads, to stop the wind noise, but it's not windy today at all, so hopefully the sound's good. Give us a thumbs up. Can you scroll down at all without turning it off?
Yeah,
thumbs
up.
So where to begin? I know, I'll begin with edible stems, and partly because I haven't had any breakfast, so I'm really hungry. And what have we got? So I'll start with this because I've mentioned it in previous videos. So I've got, I can think of about 10 plants that have really good succulent edible stems in the spring. But what have we got? Yeah, let's just have a look at about 3. What's that? Yeah, so the first is one that I've talked about in the first video, some of which I managed to upload, but I don't think to YouTube. So that's common dock or broadleaf dock, and yeah, it kind of grows out of this kind of sheath with a leaf that kind of unrolls a bit like if you're a tongue roller. It kind of does that. Look, can you see that? But anyway, I think many of us are familiar with dock as the plant that grows around nettles that you rub yourself with when it stings. So I talked about using the leaf as a wrap, a bit like a vine leaf, for stuffing and then pan frying or baking and things like this. But another part, just before it comes into flower. So I wonder if I look in here, look, there we are. There's the immature flower forming. But before that even comes out of the leaves, you've just got this lovely stem, which compared to some of the other stems I have, don't peel. It doesn't peel as easily, but and by the way, you can just eat this without peeling. Look. But it's, you know, it's a bit caveman style. So it's a little bit better if you peel it. And it's slightly tannic, but there's also sweetness in there, and it's very succulent. So, as I say, it doesn't peel as easily as some stems. In fact, look, a knife is a bit better. My default with all these things is to try and use, I think, one of the best tools that there is available to us, which you might know. It's a really, really advanced tool developed over hundreds of years, thousands of years, actually millions of years. And that is the hand, like fingers. But it's not always the best tool. But we'll see when with some of the other stems how it is a really good tool. So you see where I haven't peeled that, yuck moment, where I haven't peeled it, I've got all this fibre, which I could compost or just give to the woodland. But I find that a lot of these stems are just great as a kind of a wandering, a grazing snack. But also, they are just an excuse to dip something in one of my favourite foods, which is hummus. Dock stems and hummus. Well, have a go. Now the other one, it's okay if you wander off. I'd rather you enjoyed it and didn't catch me in camera than is, and I'm not really going to go too much into the identification of this, but you know, look at the details, botanical details of cow parsley. So let me show you these. I have picked a couple of natural variations and stages of growth. So we've got one that I picked this yesterday. I kept it in water, but it's slightly wilting, but it's in flower. You see, forming these kind of classic umbels. Now, this is all edible, but some of it's too fibrous. So we could eat the leaves now. We could eat these flowers. That'd be fine, raw or cooked. But I'm talking about stems today. So when it comes into flower, look, even if you peel that, it's just too tough. However, you get it before the flowers come out, like this one, and this one should just work with fingers, and it peels really well. Look at that, and it's really succulent, it's really juicy, and yeah, it's slightly carroty. I mean, you can do this with wild carrots in the same way before they come into flower. And of course, being a wild carrot, it's the ultimate in carrot flavour. But this one, cow parsley, Anthriscus sylvestris, it's in the carrot family, does have carrot flavours. They're just a lot more mild. So sometimes what I do with a stem like that, then I'll kind of snap it and then I'll start peeling. You see the kind of fibres in there. See those fibres like showing up? You see it? Yeah, we don't want those. But what you wouldn't realise is, although it's not motorised, this is a vehicle. It's a vehicle, yes. It's a vehicle for hummus. Yeah, but honestly, it's just really lovely on its own, and you can see it's slightly hollow. But you can put it in salads, or you could steam it if you wanted. You could pickle it. If you're really chefy, you could pipe something down into the middle of it and, you know, put a micro salad on it after you've tempered it or done some some incredible creative thing. Well, I'm giving you a bit that's not so well peeled, but you get the flavour. And then so we just got some natural variation. You saw the one I just ate, and this one is quite green, but natural variation is a completely purple stem. They're kind of hairy. The important thing is they're not blotchy. They're not kind of green. There's a green background with purple blotches and no hairs. That would be hemlock, which is not edible. I'll just show that again. Look at that. It's kind of nice, this one, because you can see how well it peels just because of the colour difference. And you can see where you haven't peeled it properly as well. Feel air coming out of that. Use it as a straw. Now, if hummus was a drink, I would suck it up because I love hummus so much. But I'm going to eat that raw. And then the last stem I'll tell you about. Please excuse me. Mustn't talk with my mouth full. Is a plant that's slightly controversial, just simply because, it's, well, I think, more than controversial, I think it's a plant that really needs a lot of respect. First of all, because it's female, and, you know, females of all species deserve a lot of respect, but it's one huge female giant clone in this country, as far as I understand. And that is this plant here, which is the old canes of Japanese knotweed. And so this is completely dead, and it doesn't grow here, by the way, but I brought it along just to kind of show you, because sometimes with plants, I mean, I look out for this, like if I'm cycling around, walking around, driving around. Can you see that clearly? Mm-hmm. In the winter, or when this isn't in leaf or flower or in shoot, I look around for these. I'm always looking for new stands of Japanese knotweed, because although lots of you will know what Japanese knotweed is in terms of its appearance at the time of year right now, when you can use it as food, some of you might not, and you'll know what to do with it as well, some of you as well. But here it is. So this is great, because this is transitioning to both using the stem in various ways, but also pickling, because we're going to pickle this. So we've got this that I kind of think looks like alien crazy asparagus, particularly when you see it kind of at that stage. That was kind of the height it was in the ground, about like that. Or you see you'll see, because basically once you've taken the leaves off, you can use it just as you would rhubarb. It's just slightly milder, and unlike rhubarb, it's hollow inside, apart from at the very base. So that there, that's where the ground was, just there on this one. So that bottom bit is kind of stuffed and full, but the rest of it's hollow. And it's interesting because this is one of only two plants, and I don't advise this, by the way, because the sensible approach to wild food is that you find out what a plant is, you see if there's a tradition of use. But back in my slightly naive days, this is back in 1995, I was well, actually, I spent my last year at university in a tent, right? And one place where I had my tent pitched on the outskirts of town in Wales, in Lampeter, there was loads of this just like coming up, and I'd never really seen it before, and it just looked foreign, looked kind of really interesting. And I was kind of just getting into wild food at the time, and I just thought, you know, what is that? Yeah, it just looks, I like the look of it. I'm really attracted to it. Yeah, I wonder if you can eat it. And I did, you know, that silly thing, which I wouldn't recommend, is I just picked some. I just snapped a stem like that, and I chewed some. And I realised it had the flavour of various other things that I ate, like docks, and a bit like the, like the dock, and rhubarb itself. And then, just on that initial taste, I went and researched, and I found out there's Japanese knotweed, and it has a tradition of use in Japan. But really, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that that was my approach. So, yeah, it's one of those classic examples of do as I say, but not as I do. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that as an approach to wild food, but I did that, and I've only done it with 2 plants in my life, and fortunately, they were both edible and good. I subsequently found. So, just briefly before we get into pickling it, in terms of harvesting this, like when it's that big, what you're looking for, and I don't know if you can kind of pick this up, but you've got on this lower level, it's kind of got a kind of matte appearance, and once you get kind of there, it kind of gets a bit shinier, and you see where it's kind of, because it's kind of near new growth, it's just kind of a denser kind of colour to it. And if this was really fresh, you'd be able to pick it, and it's one of those rare occasions where the sound, when you're using this wonderful tool, your hand, is actually really important for finding the tender bit. So it might not work because I picked this yesterday, but what you're looking for, and I can never do this, maybe you can, Sarah, can you do that thing where you pop?
No.
So it's that sound, if it's going well. So I'll give it a go. Kind of like that. So if I tried to do that down here, it just kind of does that. So that's how you distinguish the nice tender part to eat. Then we kind of take these leaves off, and I've tried over the years, because it's illegal to cause the spread of this plant, and it mainly spreads from like bits of root. And I'm going to put this down in my bag here so I can boil it up later. And I've tried to sprout it, germinate it from bits of leaf cutting. It's never actually worked, but you know, theoretically I think it could. So if you are working with Japanese knotweed, you don't want to cause the spread of it, any bits of the plant that you're not eating, certainly if it's root, but bits of leaf, just kind of boil them down or burn them or something like this. Don't just kind of scatter them around. So some people would peel this at this point. I don't do that on these tender bits. It's okay. I just, yeah. So this, what I like to do with it is make a fruit leather with it. So I might cook this and puree it, and because it doesn't have that much sweetness, I might mix that with honey or some other fruit puree or syrup that I have that kind of goes well. I often do it with a wild pear syrup. That's kind of nice, and then you get a fruit leather that's not brittle, and you can roll it up. So that's a really nice thing to do. But yeah, essentially use it like rhubarb, and from that point of view, it's not just, and this is the case with rhubarb as well, it can go with sweet and savoury dishes. Like you can cook it with duck, or particularly like fatty meats like pork and all the rest of it. Very, very nice. Or you could just fry it as a vegetable. Also very nice. Now, can you see any questions at all? I don't know if Sarah can see any. But
Someone said missed what it was.
What this was?
Yeah.
It's Japanese knotweed. And for those of you that are quite familiar with Japanese knotweed, I'll tell you a couple of things that you may not have used this for. So years ago, I used to sell wild food back in 2003 with my friend Miles, and we made various things, that ready-made products, drinks and cordials, and so we, we each had our own kind of ideas to go and create things, and one of the things that I did, because we made lots of elderflower cordial, so I got lots of these, but the important thing is that to make this ready-made drink using the elderflower cordial as the base, what I did is, well, you imagine between this stage and this dried out stage where it's totally inedible, it's actually the stage when it's about 6-7 foot high, and you need a what do you call this? Not a scythe. What do I mean? Cleaver? Do I mean cleaver? Anyway, just a big, sharp, big knife to like chop it, because it's so solid. It's still kind of this colour, but you wouldn't consider it as a food like this. But at that point, I'd gather loads of it with a meat kind of cleaver. I'd break it all up, boil it, extract the flavour, and then we used to use that to dilute the elderflower cordial and make ready-made drinks from it. And it's kind of pink, and it was one of our most popular drinks. And I kind of like that, because when I'm working with wild food, I'm always thinking, well, how can I extend the season of use for that plant? So kind of that's what we did. Oh, another fun thing, and it's not really appropriate to do it here, is these dry canes. If you kind of see these bits, they're kind of chambers. So I discovered just a few years ago, I had a load of dry canes and I was cooking by the fire. It's just a kind of fun thing to do, and because I'm always amused by explosions and popping and fire. So this pops twice in a sense. It pops when you pick it tender, but if you put this on, particularly on the embers of a fire, like so you've got a whole chamber, you just kind of leave it there. And this came as a surprise to me. I had some there just on the embers, and then suddenly, because of the pressure in a chamber, it will burst out the walls, and then they go boom. Sometimes they fly off the fire. It's a really fun thing to do. Anyway,
there's a question.
Yep.
How to tell the difference between that and hemlock?
Between what? Between
Japanese knotweed and hemlock.
Okay, Japanese knotweed and hemlock, they have completely different leaves. So we've got a leaf like that on the Japanese knotweed, and on hemlock, although this isn't hemlock, this is cow parsley, very closely related. Hemlock is much more like this, finely kind of divided, even more finely divided. So very, very different leaf. But I can see there's definitely some really good observation I can see behind that question, because the stem of hemlock indeed is hairless, and the flowering, well, the stems are kind of roundish, and they do have this. This is absolutely very similar to the colouring, the blotching on hemlock. Maybe a bit more, there's a bit more colouring on here, but it is similar. It is similar. So I understand that question. So yeah, but they are very different. Now, do you know what? I don't think it's been at least 5 minutes before I've dipped something in hummus. So,
you must be hungry.
I know. So I'm going to do this with the Japanese knotweed. And I have to say, I've never done this with Japanese knotweed before, but believe me, it works. But then this also works. That works. Also works. Now, so let's move on to pickling. And I'm going to pickle things in two ways. We're going to cold pickle things, and we're going to hot pickle things. Now, there's reasons for doing that. It's both, you have to decide whether you're hot pickling things or cold pickling things, depending both whether you need to hot pickle things in terms of rendering them safe to eat, but also it can become a question of how long it's going to last, because obviously your hot pickle is something you've sterilised it more. But let's just show you quickly, before I go into the detail, all the things we're going to pickle today. So we have, and I'm going to try and do all this in half an hour. Do you reckon I can? We've got the roots of spear thistle we're going to pickle. Oh look, and one just handily just fell off in my hand. It really wants to be pickled. We have wild garlic buds. We have ribwort plantain flowers, immature ones. We have immature elderflower. And finally, we have, well, of course, finally, we have Japanese knotweed. So, oh, and somewhere, what do I do with it? We also have slightly sad looking plant, because I picked it yesterday, dandelion. And in particular, I'm going to make dandelion capers. Caper. They look like capers. So that's what we're going to pickle. Oh, and finally, because I just love the challenge of trying to fit all this into the next half hour, we're also going to pickle jelly ear. So, are there any questions at all? No, no questions. Is this all really clear? I hope that's really clear. I know we're kind of covering a lot. And so, let's start with Japanese knotweed. My knife. And now Japanese knotweed is one that really doesn't lend itself to hot pickling because it just goes too mushy. So all I'm going to do is just chop some. I love the sound this is making. Actually, Sarah, can you come in and look at this if you can?
Is this your chopping board?
Yes, my chopping board. See the lower end? It's kind of stuffed, and then you can see it becomes hollow. Now, you might want to remove those little bits at the nodes. It's just simply for aesthetic reasons. To be honest, I'm not going to bother, but it does look nicer without them. And when I cold pickle this, even though it's cold pickled, it will still, over time, go really soft. So it's one that I cold pickle, and I kind of use really within a month or so, because what I do with most of my pickles, they either go to accompany cheese on a cheese board, or when I make a salad, wild or otherwise, I put on some olive oil and then just some random pickles. And when I'm talking about pickling here, all the pickling I'm talking about today is vinegar pickling, not salt pickling, or I guess, yeah, not salt pickling, or fermenting, lacto fermenting, which are all other approaches you could use for preserving the things that I'm pickling right now. So, let's see, one more. The other thing, if there's time, I am going to do this anyway, so even if we run out of time, well, I'm going to be here doing it. So yeah, I'm going to cook a selection of everything that I'm pickling just in a pan, just because I'm hungry. I wonder if anyone's got some, I might not see your comments, but I'd love to hear if you've got some recipes for Japanese knotweed. Now, one thing I should really mention, this is absolutely crucial, is although it's, you know, one thing to consider is it's illegal to cause the spread of this plant. The other thing is that, you know, there's a big campaign that's been going on for years to always eradicate Japanese knotweed. The reasons for that is it's mainly to do with the kind of economics, really, of it coming up and, you know, increasing the cost of doing new building developments when you find it on your property or selling your house. It can be a problem. So people are always wanting to eradicate it. You know, local councils, all the rest of it, everyone's trying to eradicate it. And they do that in various ways. Like, the best way is to kind of dig it all out and absolutely sieve all the soil. But the chemical way, use glycos, I can never say this word, glyphosate or whatever it's called. And that's either injected onto the roots, into the roots, or that and sprayed on the new shoots, and repeatedly over weeks and months through the season. So really, if you are picking Japanese knotweed, you need to know that that's not happening. Now, quite often you can tell that it is happening because the plants will look kind of sick and unhealthy, but if it's just happened, you won't know. So what I do is, when I find some Japanese knotweed, I find out whose land it's on, and then I find out who owns the land, and I ask, first of all, if it's been sprayed or treated to eradicate it, and if not, whether I can gather it. I remember some years ago, about 10 years ago now, there was a massive stand of Japanese knotweed on a place I go and take people when I'm running courses, so I thought it'd be really nice to get some. And I went and asked him. He was the owner of the Booker Cash and Carry in Canterbury, actually. And oh, by the way, this is just a generic pickle spice mix. It's got coriander, mustard seed, what else has it got in there? Bit of chili, put that in there. So I said to him, can I pick your Japanese knotweed? And he kind of said, you know, I wish you'd come a couple of days earlier, because yeah, it would have been no problem, but I've had the contractors in, they've injected all the roots, they've sprayed it all, and so yeah, I'm sorry, but you can't. And my spontaneous reaction was to laugh. I was like, and he kind of was looking at me a bit strangely, and yeah, it's like, why, really? Why is that funny? And I said, because it won't work. And sure enough, you know, the plants were sick for a couple of years. 10 years later, yeah, huge healthy colonies of Japanese knotweed. I think the only way is to come dig out the plants and the soil and sieve it. Like, so I've got some cider vinegar there. So what you can do is use any vinegar you like, really. And sometimes I usually use at least 2/3 of vinegar. Sometimes I top that up with a little bit of water, or sometimes, if I had been organised enough, what I really would have liked to have done, but I couldn't find it. I've got so many cupboards stuffed with jars of all sorts of creations, but I was looking this morning for my Japanese knotweed syrup, which is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And I was going to put a little bit of that in here. So I'll give it a shake, actually, just to make sure, get the air up, and then top it up again. I do this with all pickles, because it's not so much a problem with this one, but other pickles, if there's any air there, then they can discolour, but that one's going to be fine. So I'll leave that for about a week, and then I'll start eating it. Japanese knotweed pickle. was just wondering. Look, I've never done this. Look, bluebell in vinegar. What do you reckon? Will it go pink? Let's see. I'll just do that while I am setting up this frying pan to talk about hot pickling in a minute. Oh, that was right. Water. Bit of water. So what else am I going to cold pickle? I'm going to cold pickle where's the dandelion hiding? Can you see where the dandelion's hiding, Sarah? There we are. A wilty dandelion on green bluebells is quite hard to see. So come and have a look at the detail here. So yeah, all parts of the dandelion edible. The roots, particularly these full stuffed, healthy looking ones, not the one here that's kind of squishy, that's given a lot of its energy to produce the plant. Would probably be all right, but great for roasting, for coffee, but also as a vegetable as well, particularly if you offset the bitterness with soy sauce or chili or something like that. And then we've got this, which I'm going to use later. Well, we could tempura those, but I'm going to use that as a straw possibly later, if I remember to. But we could eat all these parts. But from a point of view of pickling, the buds, these are okay, these bigger ones, but when they get that big, you can see they're pretty much about to kind of open and come into flower. So I find that if you pickle them, they start to open. So what we really want is these ones that are lower down, like that, these. And actually, I tend to kind of make this pickle usually before I see any flowers at all, because then you go right down, look, into the plant. You're getting this right at the bottom. Look at that. Lovely little baby. It's a little baby. It's a little dandelion baby. Look at that. It's all cute. So we're going to get that. And I'm really getting into these here's one I prepared earlier moments. I think this is my third now. There come a point where I won't tell you what number it is. But come and have a look at this. Let's see. Well, first of all, like the bluebell is going, has changed colour a little bit, hasn't it? It's gone. But as I mentioned earlier, if you kind of do that on an anthill, it's the same kind of effect. It will change the bluebell really to keep completely to pink. But now, this is something that in my mind, like, I thought I'd only ever do once in my life. I made a big jar, kind of about that big, of dandelion capers about 15 years ago and said never again. Why? Well, you could just put them in like that and that would be absolutely fine. But if you're wanting them to be like capers, have the appearance of capers, you really want to take the stem off and take these the green calyx off and have it like that. And where's that little jar? You see what I did with it?
Which one?
A little jar that aha. No? No?
That one?
Ah, thank you. Gosh. Thank you, Sarah. So here is some I prepared earlier. Now, you'll see it's a slightly different colour. The only reason for that is because I picked all these yesterday, I decided to blanch them for about 10 seconds in boiling water, just because I thought if I leave this a day, they're going to start drying and opening, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted them to all to be caper-like. So what could we do here? We could either we could just use a vinegar that we like, put them in there straight, in there raw, or what I tend to do, just because with the dandelion things, the dandelion buds, they are so much like capers. In the house share where I live, we actually get through quite a lot of capers. I'm always asking people, like when they finish, once they finish the capers, to keep the liquid. So what I then do is I just get the dandelions and I put them in the old caper liquid. So, because dandelions on their own, yeah, they have a slight bitterness, they have quite a good flavour, but I'll leave these for, actually, what I normally do with this as well, and in fact I am going to do it, I usually put a little bit more vinegar as well. I'll leave that for minimum of a week, and then they'd be good to use again just on salads, or the way you would use capers, dandelion capers. But the joyful, relaxing part is sitting there removing all the calyxes of hundreds of these. It's just the most wonderful thing. Sometimes. So there we are. So that's two cold pickles. Now let's move on to 2 hot pickles. Oh, just before we do, another thing you can pickle, oh look, I'm so glad I left some room in that jar, is you could pickle the flowers of dandelion just on their own, but I'm going to just put some in there. Look. Normally I do these things separately, but I haven't got enough jars to do that, so I'm just going to do that. Like dandelion capers with dandelion flowers. But I will do a small jar of this later. I've got enough. I think I might have a spare small jar somewhere. Put that there. So that's 2. Now, hot pickling. Water's ready. And where is here? So earlier on I went and picked some elderflower. So we've got young, this is elder, and this is some young elderflower here. Now elder, the most traditional use is the ripe flowers for tea or for tempura. Or the berries for wine, for cordials, ketchups, all sorts of things. But when you're working with wild plants, a really lovely way to think about them is just as a wave through time. And as that wave moves through the seasons, what's developing at the edge of that wave is always something potentially that you could look at and think, that is a stage of the flow of this wave of seasonal development where I want to surf that wave and grab what's on there. And so what we've got now is the immature flowers, which are densely in bud, and almost reminiscent of, I don't know, something like broccoli. No, do I mean broccoli? That's what I mean, isn't it? I often say cauliflower when I'm thinking broccoli and vice versa. So there we are. And we've got some more here. Now, important thing with this is the main tradition, as I said, is using the mature flowers and the berries. And actually, more people are embracing these traditional when you can harvest from plants. Particularly like creative chefs looking at how to yeah, experience new creative potential in plants, new flavours, new textures. So the immature berries actually becoming more popular to use as capers, a bit like what I've done with the dandelion. But to make that safe to eat, we really need to heat treat it. So this is going to be my first hops pickle, and it's hot in the sense that I'm just going to get these and I'm going to put them in here. All together. Let me get them all together. Oh, I need to save some for my fry up later. Save a few. This is a downside of trying to make your ingredients look all posy. When I was rushing around before, but this is the honest truth of what really goes on. Doesn't that look nice in this lovely wicker basket? But of course I had everything in separate little plastic bags, which is much more practical, to be honest. But anyway, here we are. Goes that elder in there with a joker in the pack. Well, look at the colour. Look at the colour on there, Sarah. You see that kind of almost the green it goes. Now, put a lid on that. I'll bring that to the boil, and I'll boil it for about 30 seconds. In the meantime, I'll get a jar ready. Again, what you could do here, because I think it's particularly if you're just using pure vinegar, is to offset it with a bit of sweetness. So you could put a little bit of elderflower cordial in here, but I don't have any. That's just a bit too much. Look, I'm going to have to waste some vinegar now. Should have put it in a jar first, and then put the vinegar on. I actually really dislike elderflower cordial, so I just don't have any around. So let's see. Yep, oh, that's boiled. That handle is super hot. Now, if I was in a kitchen, I'd immediately plunge this into cold water to stop it cooking, because it's very easy to overcook these. In they go. Oh, it's hot, but look at that colour. Isn't that such a lovely colour? In they go. As I said, in fact, yeah, did I use it all up? Because this is quite a delicate pickle. I think it's a bit too harsh with just vinegar, so I'm going to put a little bit of water on there. Now, the more you dilute your vinegar, the less preserving power the vinegar is going to have. So it won't last quite as long, but it's a balance between, when you're doing any pickling, is like, you know, the texture you want, the flavour you want, and how long you want to store it. So you have to kind of balance it out. So,
do you sterilise the jars?
Did I sterilise the jars? I didn't, no. But sterilising jars would be a good thing to do. Again, it's not going to be a problem if you don't, but potentially it won't last quite as long as if you did. But I tend to use these up quite quickly, so I'll leave that in there for a week or so. It's another one that if you leave over time, it will break down, and it will the little immature flower buds will start to come off the stem, and it'll just be a mess. But it will stay good like this for certainly 2 or 3 months. But I'd use this after a week. So that's 3. Oh, sorry, I did think. we could put that on the log. We can, oh no, shall I, look, I'll just put them all here. Yeah. All the things that we've done. And I just realised I want to do another hot pickle. How are we doing time-wise?
I don't know.
So we'll do another 2 cold pickles. So the next cold pickle is spear thistle. So that's actually why I bought the gloves. And I'm glad I bought the gloves because that's got a metal handle. It's really hot. And anyway, so that's lucky. But spear thistle is a wonderful plant, and I kind of like to use it for, oh, let me just show you. Hopefully I won't knock my pan over. So that's a big spear thistle that was growing on the garden, and although I'm going to pickle the root, let's just transition back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, which was using plant stems, because although I'm going to use the root of this, which you could use raw or cooked if you don't mind a bit of flatulence, because many plants store their sugar as inulin, which we can't absorb or digest, but your gut flora absolutely loves it. So it's really good for your gut flora, but it makes your bottom quite communicative. I've never said that before, but I like putting it that way. Bottom songs. But it's still good to use. But what I'm looking for is, strip down these leaves. Oh yeah, before that I was just going to show you, have a look at the spear thistle, really distinctive leaf, particularly that end bit and the long, I don't know if technically they're thorns, but they're certainly spiky bits. But look, we pulled all this off. Water's boiling now. Look at that. Lid. Oh, that's it. So,
yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Turn that down. Sometimes teeth are better than hands. Even gloved hands, it's kind of quite awkward to get on that, and it's still quite spiny. So. I'm not deliberately doing this just to look like some primitive wild man. This is actually the technique I use with this, because it is just practical. Oh. And actually, I'm experiencing the flavour twice. So I do this. And then when I come to eat it. So now compared to the cow parsley stem, look, you've got a pretty substantial, juicy, lovely stem of spear thistle. Look at that. And it has a delightful crunch to it as well. Really delightful crunch. It's hollow. You can see. And sometimes when I find these growing in the shade, they can be like that, a little bit bigger, and really like suitable for stuffing. But listen to the crunch of this. But do you know what's missing from that whole? Any ideas? Hummus. Hummus is missing. Is it back? Yeah, I didn't realise after an hour this video just stops, so I'll probably lose a few of you. I'll mention that at the beginning next time, that after an hour I will cut out for a bit. Anyway, I've corrected the error, and now we have spear thistle stem peeled and stuffed with hummus. Lovely. So I'll try that. Go on. It's a really good one. What do you think of that?
Yeah, celery.
But much nicer than celery. I mean, much more mild. But I've lost my knife now. Right. Can anyone see it?
Mine.
Oh, I'll tell you. The assistant I have here, Sarah, is just utterly amazing. Look. So, these roots are quite tender. So I'm just going to chop those on my book, as you do. But look how nice they are. What I like to do with these, the thing I most like to do with these is make shavings of them. What do you call that thing? Mandolin? Like shavings, and marinate them in lemon juice and serve them raw with fish. That's really nice, like slices, particularly like bigger roots. But I'll pickle those. Where's the one that snapped off? There we are. So I could peel it and make it all white, but I'm not going to bother. Now remember, the main reason I do this is just so I've got some random pickles to put in a salad instead of making a salad dressing, with some olive oil and then just some pickles. There we are, a few of those. And a little jar. A cute little jar. Some more vinegar. So that one I'm just going to put in a little bit of chili. Doesn't look like much, but it just gives a little bit of heat to it. But you could put in whatever you like into your mixes. We're almost at the penultimate one. I'm going to finish this later, make another little jar. How does this one go in, Sarah? So I'm going to leave it here. Now, what have we got? Yeah, we have the ribwort plantain, which we could raw pickle these, but it's slightly bitter. And so I'm going to just boil those for a couple of minutes to both tenderize them and remove some of the bitterness. Now these are the plants. I got them so you could see them at different stages. So ribwort plantain, that's as they were when I picked them. This one here, it's just going to flower. Actually it had lots of the flowers on, but they fell off when I kind of washed it. And there we are. That's how you might see it growing in your garden. You're picking that up nicely. Isn't that lovely? It's like lovely. I don't know about the roots. I mean, there's not much to them, but the rest of the plant, it's all edible and great. those raw immature flowers, they taste very much like raw button mushrooms, and sometimes people work with them in that way, like get a load of them, blitz them up with some cream. It's kind of nice as a salad, as a dressing for a salad. Now, I tip away the water. Wow, that is so hot. Pans with metal handles, I just don't get it. Why? Now this is where it's very important. I mean, this recipe isn't the authentic wild recipe unless you pick out your hot, debittered, immature plantain, ribwort plantain leaves with some Japanese knotweed tongs. Because, you know, sometimes in the wood, everything you need is just there. There we are. In they go. Now, quite often I just use these without the stems, but this time I'm using the stems as well. There we are. But although I've got some more in there, you see, and the temptation is to stuff them all in the jar, I'm going to resist that temptation. The reason being is that whenever you're making a pickle, you don't really want to absolutely ram. It's not like you're lacto-fermenting some greens and you're like stuffing it all into the jar. You really want a lot of space so that the vinegar can just circulate and preserve well. Now, I find this one, to my taste, really goes well with a little bit of pickling spice. I use a spoon because all the mustard seeds and the smaller things just sink to the bottom. And I just really like this with a little bit of chilli. Not too much, but just a little bit. Cheese board, salad, 2 more pickles to go. I know that's what I said last time. Now, there's, just before I forget, another reason I like working with spear thistle is not just for that lovely edible stem and the root, but I do like a wild food challenge, and all those kind of thorny bits, like, you know, you're not immediately going to think that's obvious as greens, you know, but there's ways of working with that you can get the whole thing and liquidize it and squeeze out the juice, and just use that juice as a drink, or to add to your lacto ferments. But another thing I like to do is I get the leaves and I dry them, and then I crush them and I sieve them. It gets rid of all those little thorns, all those little things which I can probably stick in my face. It's so thorny. Yeah, is it sticking? Yeah, they would just stick in your hands and it's really annoying. But if you get those out, you can kind of make little biscuits out of them. Just flour and fat and leaf powder. That's what I've done there. So just a way to use the leaf. Now, I would say with this one, before you taste it, Sarah, this was an experimental one where I also incorporated powdered root, and it's not nearly as nice as the one that just uses the leaf powder, which is why I wasn't eating that and saying, bliss is upon me, now that I'm eating the heart-shaped thistle biscuit. But you know what? You know what? I think you might know what.
Hummus.
Hummus. Oh, ecstasy. The perfect combination. So yeah, it's just a bit of a quirky way of using the leaf if you wanted to. So 2 more pickles to go. I'm going to go quite quick on these ones. What have I got? No, just one. Is it one more? Yeah, one more. Oh no, 2 more. But I kind of run out of jars. So, how should I do that? I know. Yeah. It's going to be slightly silly because, so, jelly ears that grow on elder predominantly. There we are. These are ones I picked dry. Now the truth is, some I picked dry and some I didn't, but all of them I plunged in water and I washed them really well, and then I dried them, re-dried them. So that's, I would fill a jar with those. I'm using a little jar at the moment. I'm just going to do 2. It's like micro pickling. So these are really good, just shredded on salads. So because these were dry and they're going to absorb the vinegar, what I need to do is, once it's all absorbed, I need to add some more vinegar to top it up. And they last, jelly ear pickled seem to last really well. Like, I've had ones that I haven't even bothered washing, and I did it as a test. They were even quite muddy, and I just put them in a jar, and they stayed good for over a year in the fridge. It was amazing. But ideally, you want your produce that you're using, your wild greens or your mushrooms, to be as in good condition and clean as possible. Now, the final pickle, before I start cooking a few things, just to have a snack, is, oh no, yes and no, this is it. So this is what I've been looking forward to most, because everything that I've done so far I have done before, but I've never done this. And this is just a quirky thing, because I was looking around to see what I had, and normally with wild garlic buds, what I would do is I would salt pickle them, which in my Instagram post there's many things about salt pickling wild garlic buds. Now, I picked these a few days ago. Actually, Sarah and we picked these a few days ago, and they were all fully closed, weren't they, when we picked them? But because it's at the point when they're just about to open up, because I didn't deal with them immediately, they have started opening up, but that's okay. So normally I salt pickle them like capers, but what I discovered this morning, and only someone that works with a lot of wild food and has jars of absolutely bizarre things lying around would have this. So it's super niche. So what I do a lot with wild garlic leaves every few years is I make leaf curd. So basically I blitz up the leaves with some water, and I extract the protein, I coagulate the protein, I put it through a filter, and I've got a really thick green garlicky curd. But a byproduct of that is I have the liquid that's left, which is essentially, it's just the liquid of the wild garlic leaf. Yeah, so this one, I got loads of wild garlic leaf, and I liquidized the whole lot. And this is without water. So what we've got is the pure juice of wild garlic leaf after all the protein has been extracted as it's coagulating in the pan. What's he talking about? I don't even know what I'm talking about. What's he going on about? What's in that stuff that he's drinking? It's turning him mad. Anyway, it's not vinegar, but I looked at this, 28th of April 2018. It's just been sitting in the larder. It wasn't even, the lid wasn't even on loosely, and I tasted it yesterday thinking this is going to be really disgusting, but it's really nice, but it's not vinegar. So what did I do? I thought, well, you know, I wish I had some acetic acid powder, right? I don't even know if such a thing exists. It probably does. So I can make some vinegar. And I thought, well, I don't have any of that. Oh, but I've got lots of citric acid. So I put a couple of teaspoons of citric acid in there. And now, essentially, I have wild garlic leaf juice vinegar. Niche. I told you this is niche. Going on my wild garlic bulbs. And because there's quite a lot of air again in those flowers, I'll leave that for a day or so, and then I'm going to re-top it up because there's going to be a gap. So there, look, can you zoom in on those, Sarah? Oh, a couple of things. Look, this little spider here has kind of reminded me of, I just thought I'd show you these. It's one of my favourite things to pickle. And I had one somewhere, but I've lost it now. It's in all this chaos down here. I wonder if I can see it. But these are the flower buds of oxeye daisy. They make such an excellent pickle, and it's partly just because the pattern is so lovely. So they also candy very well. A lot of things that you pickle, you can also candy. So we're just coming to an end now. And you think you could see any, are there any questions you could see? If no questions. So that's a very quick crash course in pickling. Cold pickling, hot pickling. And oh, one thing that I saw a lot of yesterday, which I will mention, is this plant. Just because it's just coming into the time when you would think of this as a plant for pickling, and that I would say in about 2 weeks, certainly in the southeast. It's a member of the cabbage family, and you might recognise this. You might recognise this if I told you about the seed pods. Now, it's called lunaria or honesty, and the seed pods are like, hence lunaria, are like full moons. I had one earlier, but I left it somewhere. And they're papery thin and kind of white, silvery, and they make a wonderful decoration. But actually, it's a member of the cabbage family, of which all tender parts are edible. I mean, it's all theoretically edible, but now that's too tough. But the flower is good and edible. But from a pickling point of view, what's really lovely is these flowers, once as they're finishing, that seed pod, before it becomes that moon shape, is green, and in the early stages it's a particularly shiny green, and you can use it a bit like mange too. You can eat it raw, cook it like mange too, but it pickles really well, so that's kind of nice. So I like to do that. So just something to think about that's coming. But any questions? No questions? Then I shall just cook up my breakfast. Of one of the most random, so we've got Japanese knotweed, with garlic bud, ribwort plantain, what else? A bit more oil. Nuts and seeds.
There's a question, can we eat white honesty pods too?
White honesty pods. Now, white honesty pods, I make a lot of paper out of mushrooms, particularly out of birch polypod. And when I do this by myself or with fruits, often we go out and we search for lovely botanicals that we can embed in the paper. And I particularly like paper that people have made where they've embedded honesty seed pods into the mushroom paper. It looks beautiful. But from the point of view of eating it, it's just tough. Like, there might be some genius out there that knows a way to render that edible, but no. It's the tender young seed pods when they're still green, but not just green, because it's the early stages of them being green. Once they get a bit bigger, to about that big, the colour goes, it's a kind of matte green, at which point they're just too tough. But there's a stage when they're kind of that big to kind of that big, when they're this glossy green, and you can use them like mange too. And that's the only edible way of eating honesty seed pods at those times. What else can I put in here? I think I should put a bit of root in there. There we are. To be served with hummus. So thanks for joining me today. I know there wasn't many questions, but I will look through and see if there were, and you know, if they're the ones that I think would be useful for people to know the answer to. I'll put the answer in the link when I post this up on YouTube, which I've almost kind of perfected. So it's goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from Sarah.
Bye bye.
Who, I must say, I am so grateful for your skills today.
Pleasure.
And it's goodbye from this absolutely stunning bluebell wood. I'll see you next time.